Today's guest, we have Brandy Holder, an executive coach and brand strategist. Brandy specializes in helping solo operators and founders who are what she refers to as rebels with a reason. You can find her writing on Medium at Brandy Holder or inspiring and connecting with her community on LinkedIn. Brandy's healing journey began while writing for tech founders from hospital waiting rooms during her husband's terminal cancer diagnosis, a period she calls her 2-year notice on the end of her marriage. But instead of seeing it just as a tragedy, she used that time and the months after his death to finally heal the patterns that had kept her choosing unavailable partners and accepting scraps as love. When she started dating again just 6 months after he passed, not everyone understood, but she ended up in the best relationship of her life with both her partner and herself. She's here to share what normal relationships actually look like when you've only known fighting, crying, and feeling alone, and why sometimes grief isn't about mourning what you lost. It's about recognizing what you finally get to gain. Welcome to Chaos and Chemistry, a podcast focused on having all the chemistry and feel-good you desire in your relationships without the chaos and toxicity. My name is Legan. I'm a former counselor turned coach, and I'm here with my friend and co-host Max.
I'm Max. I'm a relationship and trauma coach helping people transform their lives.
Brandy, welcome to the show. We're so happy to have you join us today.
Thank you, guys. I really appreciate being here. I've been fangirling your work. I really enjoy listening to the show. It always gives me a little nugget of something to take with me for the day as a reminder of where my journey is going to. So thank you guys for having me today.
You're so welcome. A question we always like to start with is, why does the topic matter? So why does this topic of grief, loss, reinvention, why does it matter?
I think the topic matters because we live in a culture that treats any major change as purely tragic. And it's a label that keeps people stuck. You know, society slaps those labels on us because it makes the packaging convenient. You know, Sarah the divorcee, Mike who lost his job, Brandy the widow, these labels can create a situation where we unconsciously bend toward limits for what's possible in our lives. And so something I've learned through my experience and my research is that dramatic change is the great equalizer of humanity. Everyone will face it. And the question isn't whether disruption will happen, it's whether you'll use it as an opportunity for radical growth, right? The story you have today doesn't have to be the defining chapter in your life.
So Brandy, tell us your story and what happened with your late husband.
Yeah, so, Tim and I snuck off and we had a really quiet little ceremony in 2018, private and away, and thought that was like the beginning of our lives together. And then 44 days later, we found ourselves sitting in oncology talking about liver cancer. And we were laughing because first it was like, well, those things don't happen to you, right? And then second, it was like, well, that's your liver, them things grow back, right? So we just kind of took it as like a joke. And then what followed was this really surreal new reality, right? It was like 8 hours a week, every week at the Cancer Center for infusions, trips back and forth to St. Louis, a sick body, right? And a barrage of well-meaning advice from everyone. And the Cancer Center became my office. And the thing that nobody prepares you for is the healthcare system is just for the treatment of disease, nothing else. We were completely ill-equipped emotionally and financially. We had both poured money into new business ventures, and there was no safety net. He couldn't work, and while my business was growing, it wasn't enough to support two people through a health crisis. And Tim, who already was not a big talker, totally shut down, and the man had no coping skills, and I coped by staying busy, cooking everything from scratch, working constantly. And I remember just like laying in bed every night for 400 days. It was like 400 nights that I laid there and cried myself to sleep, wondering when the lights were going to go out, And then something shifted. The work I had been doing started to really pay off in a big way. And I started landing contracts that really took the money issue completely and totally off the table. And suddenly, I was juggling executive level work while caregiving. But I was really grateful for obviously the financial relief, but the distraction too.
I just can't imagine. That had to have been so overwhelming.
It was. But when you're in it, I don't know that I was like overwhelmed in it. I think I was like exhausted. Mm-hmm. I was to the point where my body didn't even understand that. I think when you're overwhelmed, you're like, I need a break. Mm-hmm. But I didn't even understand that I needed or could take a break. It was a weird situation.
Well, it sounds like it was more just survival. When you're in survival mode, you don't know you're in it. You're just trying to survive. Yes. And then the outsider looking in goes, oh my gosh, the real emotion would have been complete and utter overwhelm. But because that would be too much, the body stays in survival.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So how would you describe your relationship before the cancer diagnosis? I'm just curious if your ex-husband had that more avoidant attachment style that we talk about attachment styles a lot on our podcast. And it sounds like when he was in crisis, you were the one that went into overdrive and he was the one that shut down. So did that dynamic play out before the diagnosis at all?
Yeah, and it's interesting when I listen to you guys' work. I never had the labels and like the pieces for it, right? To give you an example, our relationship was always complicated, but to really like sum up the dynamic, like a few months into our dating, we had made weekend plans. We were going to go to his favorite bar on Friday night, and he was going to bring me lunch to work on Saturday because I was still working the weekends. And then we were going to have a nice dinner Saturday evening. And I decided to stay home on Friday because I was exhausted. I was working 60 hours a week, and then I had to get up and do it on a Saturday too. And the last thing I wanted to do was go party at a bar that night. And he said it was fine. And then he went out and got completely and totally trashed and slept through our lunch date. So when I asked him if he did that on purpose to get back at me for not going out with him on Friday, he said yes. Like he told me exactly who he was. And instead of like understanding that was the dynamic of the relationship, I got my feelings hurt and canceled dinner. And then his response was another like tit for tat, like, you're going to make me call these people and cancel a reservation. And so that was like the quintessential characteristic of our relationship for 7 years. It was two very unhealed people bumping around through life together. And I thought that like 50% bad and 50% good was normal. So, I mean, I don't want to vilify him or anything. There was a lot of great things about him, but if it wasn't party time, I was completely and totally on my own, at home, on my own. And that was the dynamic.
Yes. It's interesting you say you don't want to villainize him, because Max and I talk a lot about how no one really is the villain. We're all just using the few tools we have in our toolbox to try and get through life and have our dreams come to fruition with 2 tools. And so if you chose him, and I know you are aware of this now because you've gone through your own self-awareness work, where do you think a relationship like that began? Like truly began, because beliefs drove you to choose a relationship like that. Stories drove you to choose a relationship like that. So where did that foundation for that relationship really begin?
Yeah, and that took me a really long time to peel the onion on, by the way. I mean, it was like layers and layers and layers before I figured out that story, but that pattern started really early in my life. My grandmother really preached the independent woman to me like it was gospel, but I watched my mom struggle with money and bad relationships my entire life. Right? My mom worked incredibly hard, but we also got a lot of help from my grandparents. So I heard this beautiful song of independence, but I was living in an environment of scarcity and anxiety. The message was be independent, but also money equals scarcity and stress and hard times. And so it created this impossible bind. I was supposed to be strong and self-sufficient, and I was. I mean, I had a lot of really big boulders in my life, a lot of really big things. But I also knew there was this whisper in the back of my mind that said, you can't really make it on your own. So I found partners who let me play both of those roles, independent when I wanted to be, but with a safety net in case I got scared.
That is my pattern to a T as well. And I think a lot of women get that message.
Yeah, it took me a long time to hear that and to understand it.
Isn't it interesting that when you say safety net, a relationship like that doesn't really feel safe? But there was a sense of safety in a person being there, but you getting to kind of come in and out as you pleased.
Yep.
So what safety did it provide? What risk did it keep you from experiencing?
Nothing, right? I mean, my feelings were hurt all the time. It was not a great relationship for probably either one of us, because when your feelings are hurt, often you retaliate, or you shut down too. So I imagine that on both sides of the fence, it was not a great relationship. And so it's not like it was saving me from anything. Part of me really wanted somebody there to grow with. I was doing such big, incredible things in my life that I was so, so proud of, that I coming from a blue collar background, never thought those things were possible. So this part of me is having all of this huge, incredible success. And I wanted so deeply to have somebody there to grow with me and to be part of those pieces. But again, it's not like it was really safe, because it was unhappy. It was chaotic, and I cried and I felt alone. So I don't know if that really answers the question or not, but I don't know what it really did provide me.
Well, sometimes the biggest risk is having what we want if we're not prepared to have it. So a lot of listeners, they want love and they want to grow with someone, but they have no idea what that looks like. So if the perfect person that wants to grow and is emotionally safe and is consistent shows up, you don't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
It's like being gifted a sailboat when you don't sail. I mean, it's beautiful and it's great and that's wonderful, but okay, what do I do with this thing?
Exactly what would have happened to me if somebody stable and the ideal person would have shown up. I'd have been like, ew. What do I do with this thing?
Right. You're boring. Yeah. So we know how grief shaped you during that time. It cracked you open to this new level of self-awareness and healing. How did it shape your work as an executive coach? I mean, how do you wrote in a blog, when do I finally get to feel like me again? And I'm just wondering how you help others find their message and their voice after loss or setbacks. So can you share what that journey looked like professionally?
Yeah, I'll start by saying it's really interesting to have spent 40 years in a pattern and then only 5 years really just starting to figure it out. And so I carried this scarcity thing around money with me for the bulk of my career and life without even really knowing that. And so professionally, it made me seek validation in everything. Every dollar, every accolade was a trophy proving my worth and value. So the real test for me, before I really began doing the work for myself and getting into the work for my clients, was putting myself in a situation where I had the financial freedom to step back and take a break from my business, which felt like such a gift. But then I had a complete and total identity crisis, right? Mm-hmm. Because now who was I without the big money and the big titles? And who was I if I wasn't sitting at my desk achieving something? We think we're going to run off to the beach and answer all of our existential questions and sip margaritas and have this beautiful time. But that's not how it happened for me. I imagine that is not how it happens for a lot of people. And, I fell into this well of depression before I even realized what was happening. I couldn't have brought a client into my business if I paid them to be there. Mm. So doing all of that work around that, it took a team. It was counselors, coaches, peers, family to help me see what I'd actually accomplished. I had built my independence. I had created financial stability. I had helped someone live beautifully in their final days and had done the emotional work to close that chapter with peace. And so that before I started doing the work, I had to realize that the person who stepped in to save me was me. But I needed help really seeing that very clearly. And so that's kind of something that I brought into my work, was really the ability to share my story. I think gives people permission to see themselves differently, right? It's this little break where we see that you don't have to have it figured out. It doesn't have to be perfect. It can be a little messy. And then you actually see them sit back in their chair, and the transformation is very visual, and they literally go, wow, I have all these things, I can do all these things, and I can do them with what I have today. And, having that understanding of their story and their power is how I've really been able to bring this into my work. And it's been really amazing.
Brandy, I'm curious, with your late husband, you said there was a lot of healing towards the end. What did that look like between you and him? How did that transform that experience in his final days?
Yeah, I don't think we did any healing together. He was just completely shut down, and I don't think he ever even really thought he was going to die. So there wasn't this moment in time where he was like, hey, I should probably do some, reconciliation here on the balance sheet. But for me, it was having this understanding that life is really short, and I'm literally watching a person leave the earth with a lot of unexpressed wants and desires, and I don't have to be that person. And I don't have to be angry at the life that I created with him. I don't have to be angry at the choices that I made. I can really open up my heart and have love for this person who's kind of wobbling through life, very messy as I was as well. And I think for me, it was just kind of giving him this peace and giving myself this peace and permission and gratitude and kind of closing it up that way.
That is so beautiful. I'm just sitting here going, wow. That's how real closure happens. And that's probably why you did start dating. It sounds like before the rest of the world was ready for you to start dating. So when you started dating, what surprised you the most about that experience? Because if anyone deserves to start dating, it's someone that has been caring for someone for 2 years, rowing a boat by themselves, has gone through so much emotionally and financially. If anyone deserves to have a nice date, it's you. But it sounds like not everyone saw it that way.
No one really said it that way. So I want to answer that, but I also want to go back, and I think I didn't answer the other part of your question when you said, when do I finally get to feel like me again? And so I wanted to say through that experience that I never really went back to feeling like myself again, which was wonderful because my heart was open in a different way and I got to grow into this new version of myself. When I decided that I was ready to start dating, my biggest obstacle wasn't readiness. I was ready. I knew what I wanted. I had spent months learning about myself, creating peace, knowing what I would accept and what I wouldn't. And so for me, it wasn't me. It was like, I think people expected to see me crying and struggling and proving that I was sufficiently devastated, right? When I did first start dating, we took it really slow and easy and steady, but I was glowing, you guys. I was glowing, and people were shocked and confused. And so I think the hardest part for me was like turning all that down and learning to trust my own instincts over other people's expectations and knowing that grief of any kind, whether it's your job loss, your divorce, whatever your grief is not a performance for other people, right? It's your own private journey, and you get to decide what healing looks like. So that was the obstacle. And the thing that really wasn't the obstacle was really being healed to attract someone who was also healed, right? You kind of touched on that a little bit earlier. I didn't understand that dynamic. I didn't have the language for it at the time because I had not done my own education in the coaching world. But I could not have brought him into my life before. The work I had done during that time created space for a completely, totally different kind of relationship that was based on choice and not need, which was something that I had done never before in my life.
I'm curious, Brandi, did that all emerge after the death, or was it a process those last 2 years? And then where did the majority of the transformation happen? Was it processing it afterwards? Because I'm thinking of everybody that is going through a similar thing, and it's like so painful during it. Is that when it's actually blossoming, or does it blossom on reflection?
Yeah. I like to talk to people about grief because I had the most messy, disastrous grief story I think there was. I grieved him while he was alive because I understood that he was going to die. He did not understand that, and I had to have that burden by myself. And then I was so busy after he died. I was working as an executive in a startup that my life was just going on muscle memory. So I was kind of processing through it. I started bringing people in to help support me with what that transition looked like. But the crash didn't actually start to happen for me on the identity crash until a year after, right? And I think sometimes that happens for people when they go through something big. Like, I don't think that the crash happens right away. I think you go through this period of time where you don't have the thing that you've been attached to, and then you don't know who you are, and then things kind of start to crash around you. So it's weird because I had this big, huge transformation while he was alive, and then a year after he was gone, and then being able to step back again, even these years later, as I'm writing about it and sharing my work, I'm still going through it, right? It's still happening. It's still unfolding. And I guess that's normal, right?
It's very normal. If there is one thing that I wish people understood about grief is it's sort of always with you in little ways, and to just accept that is really freeing.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think there'll ever be a time where I don't have moments of grief around the loss of lots of different things in my life. And the more you can just give yourself permission to grieve things, even if something else wonderful has come into your life, the more you're loving yourself when you do that, and the more you can really move on. But it's not like a start point and an end point at all.
Yeah. And everyone's grief is so unique to them.
So you started dating, and you had a completely different relationship, and your business took on a whole new message. And what would you say the main message of your coaching business is?
Yeah, I think I really allow people the space to see themselves differently so that they can create differently. And I think that's probably what sets me apart in anything else that I'm doing. Is I'm not bringing you a framework, I'm trying to jam you in. It's more like, let's give me some crazy goals that you want to do. And I'm not going to tell you you can achieve them, but like, let's throw them up on the board and see. I want you to see yourself in these in a different way that you maybe haven't been able to do that. And let's talk about what that looks like. And the transformation in people when they accomplish things that they think are so far out of their capabilities, that's like the reason I get up every day, right? It's like such a big deal to me, because I'm like sitting here as living proof as somebody who came from nothing and built this thing. And I don't know how I did it. I'm not exactly sure. There wasn't like stepping stones and bricks. It was just every day I got up and tried something new, and I gave myself permission to be messy and excited. And, you know, I get to do that with my clients, and it's really fun.
What do you think when we're working with clients? I mean, it had to be like big tragedy in my life that really got me on a path of healing, similar to you. And I think everybody's has like, we hit the rock bottom, and that's where like the only way is like, now the transformation has to begin. How do you work with people that may not have gone through that experience? Like, what's in the way for most people? What do they get hung up on, and how do you shift them through that?
I can remember when we were first going through the cancer journey, and I saw this pillow that said YOLO on it. You know, you only live once. And I got like really angry, like the blood vessels started popping out of my forehead and stuff, because what I had realized in that moment is that we toss those around as platitudes, and we don't live that way. And that's why for so many of us, something really tragic has to happen in our lives for us to be different. And I hate to say it that way, because I don't want to wish tragedy on anybody, but you know, a lot of times if you haven't had tragic circumstances, or you haven't had a lot of risk, if you've been very risk adverse in your life, you haven't had the fall down, like where you gotta like scrape your face off the pavement and be like, okay, well, I looked really stupid, and you know, now I want to try something else. And I think I like to work with people who have done that, because they are willing to take more risks and be the rookie in the trenches and look like totally on cringe mountain while they're trying to figure it out. I think you gotta like get yourself on cringe mountain, otherwise you're like, it may be like, cool, I never had anything bad happen, but I never had anything really, really good happen either.
Yeah. Well, people that have known tragedy and have known that level of disappointment and powerlessness and helplessness and feeling like a failure, they know that the worst case scenario is not that they're there again. You know, that doesn't scare people. Well, like when you've been at the bottom, you know what the bottom is. And you're like, okay, my worst case scenario is recreating that again, not being there again, but recreating it. And I think that's the difference, because when you don't know that you're the one that's creating this tornado of circumstances in your life, then you fear the bottom. But when you've been at the bottom and you look up and you go, I know exactly how I got here, and it was my doing, then you do feel braver. And so I think it's important to know, what steps led you to the bottom, wherever you are. And then you're just not as afraid. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think all the time, like nothing can kill me now. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And I'm not invincible by any stretch of the imagination, but I mean, laying in that bed by myself and crying every night for 400 nights and wondering if the power was going to go out, wondering if we were going to survive a healthcare crisis where people don't survive those every day, and then being the person who could pull that off, pull that holy air ball that we're seeing on all the memes now. Like, I don't know. It took me a long time to be able to accept that. I had to have a lot of people tell me that I did that, because I was like, that's what you do. You just figure it out. And I needed a lot of people to say, you need to put the brakes on a minute and really realize what it is you've done here and where you've come from. And so I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of scary things in my life, but my God, what is scarier than like thinking you're going to be like totally devastated financially, It's like, I don't know, guys.
Yeah. For 400 days straight. I mean,
400 days. Think about that when you're in it. It was an eternity.
Yeah. Oh my God.
After I'd had the story my whole life, maybe I put myself in that situation. I had the story my whole life that money was a problem, and now I was like really drowning in it.
Yeah. Anyone listening has heard Max and I talk about the subconscious, and our subconscious beliefs drive our behavior. And they look around and they go, who can help solidify this crappy belief about money? That guy. And you go, I want to date him. Or, oh, we have chemistry.
Yeah.
And our subconscious lives in our body. And so it pulls, if we're not aware of what our subconscious says and how it feels and what it believes, it will just pull us through life, and we'll get everything we believe about life. And if you,
I did.
Yeah, you did.
I sure did. Stress, anxiety, money problems. I was alone. I was not alone, but alone. Yeah, I got everything I thought I wanted.
Right. And we always tell people, but that's it should be such an encouraging message, because it means you can change it.
Yeah. Oh, I love that.
So, Brandy, you start dating again. It's a totally different experience. Just contrast that for us. What does it feel like now in this stage of life?
Yes. Is he sleeping through your lunch dates?
Oh, hell no. That man would be eaten by a Bengal tiger before he missed something that he promised me he would do.
Oh.
That's so sweet.
He would come with no shirt, no shoes, and like half a limb missing before he would cancel a lunch date on me.
He'd be limping. He'd be limping to the restaurant.
He would. He'd be like, here, honey, here's your meatball sub. I don't know. The only way I can describe it is like easy. Yeah. It's just like really easy and really peaceful. And we've heard that expression until we're like blue in the face, that when somebody shows you who they are in the beginning, like right away, you should trust that. And that's so true. You know, like I said, we took it really, really slow, because I was like, holy hell, like I can't be dating somebody, and I sure can't be in a serious relationship. Like, no, this is not happening. But the more that we spent time together, like I enjoyed how easy it was. It was really different. It wasn't stressful. I didn't feel like I had to like ball up and like be this big boss lady. You know, I could just show up in this really like feminine side of myself that I haven't been able to be in a really, really long time. I could just show up and he could just take care of things, and I didn't have to feel bad about that. He wasn't going to throw it in my face and say, but look at all the things I've done for you. You know, it's been really easy and peaceful.
I can't think of anyone that deserves peace and ease more than someone who has experienced great loss, whether that be a job or a child or a spouse or a marriage or a dream. And so I'm just so happy that you did the work that was required of you to have this. And now you have it, and you're able to really soak in the deserving of that as well.
Yeah.
And help other people, because it's all, the journey is to learn these truths yourself and then share them to the world. So it's beautiful you're already doing that, Brandy. Your life is a beautiful testimony to that.
Well, thank you. Yeah. I feel like a kid on Christmas morning when I come to my desk in the morning now. It's like all of this, the stuff that I went through was to be able to help other people really realize their dreams. Like I don't want, for somebody who wants to have something, I don't want them to leave this earth not understanding that they can have it. And I think for me, that's really, really the exciting part.
That's a beautiful takeaway from today. Is there anything else that you would like to share with our listeners that we have not talked about?
I think we can have things that we don't think that we can have, right? It's, again, going back to those unconscious things. I think it's really important. I will stand on this hill forever that you call in help for things. I spent my whole life thinking I could solve my problems by myself, and I was really good at that. But when I brought people in to help me, that was when things really started to change for me. And so I think that's the job. The job is to become who you're meant to be and trust that the right relationships are going to grow from that foundation, and that you don't have to do that alone, right? You can call in help for that. And I think it's a really beautiful thing when you do that.
So, Brandy, where can our listeners find you? And are there any upcoming projects that we should all check out?
Yeah, I would say, most of my work lives at the intersection of business strategy and personal transformation, because I really feel like you cannot separate who you are from how you show up in your business, especially when you're a solo operator, as most of my people are. And I'm currently working on a book that gives people permission to be happy after loss, basically, any loss that's happening in their life. So if any of that resonates, I would say just come on over and find me on LinkedIn at Brandy L. Holder. I always like to meet new people and hear stories. So, yeah.
If today's episode resonated with you and you'd like to learn more about us and how we might be able to help you feel better in the life you have today while creating the life you truly want, check us out on www.chaosandchemistry.com or send us an email at connect@chaosandchemistry.